Hello and welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels. My name is Evan Docvila Paul. This is Mike Dashes Barry. It's just us for now, but we are going to be bringing in a special guest about halfway through the cast. But to start out with, Mike, how you doing?
I'm good, hanging in there. It's been a week, but we're talking Star Wars today, and we're getting all I don't know, is mathy the right word? Mathy's not the right word, but it's
It's
math concepts today, right?
Yeah. There's no math because I hate math.
Oh, I
I use
love
it.
math.
Oh, hey, good for you, man. We need people like you out there in the world. Uh, I I do the math that I'm required to do in my day job, and nothing more. It doesn't sort of uh, wake me up in the morning, so to speak. But sure, math, there's a use for it. But what I do like is algorithms and logic and heuristics, and I could like start getting really boring here, but uh, it wouldn't be as boring as math, by the way. But yeah,
I
we're
just
we're
want to
gonna
be
get.
clear. We went over all of those terms and everything in our math classes in school, so I'm not
Well,
sure
that's
they're
because mathematicians think that they know everything, and that they're like, here are the little words that sub mathematicians talk about, but we're going to talk about the real deal coming up.
okay. All right.
So yeah, I'm not privy to that level of knowledge, but I do talk about logic algorithms and things like that. So we're gonna try to get into that a little bit. And so we have that. We have a new spin on Minis in Memoriam. We're going to get to exactly what we're talking about a little bit later, but we also have a an interview with uh, none other than Hank from Adepticon, one of the core founders of Adepticon. I was able to get some time chatting with him, and we did actually get some pretty. We got some little bit of juicy info about the prize wall. Nothing too specific, but yeah, please do stick around for that. So yeah, we got a cool packed show. Even though for most of it it's just us, we will do the best we can. I promise. Uh, so to start out with, super brief Patreon reminder: we have a Patreon. Hey, cool, check it out. Patreon.com/the Fifth Trooper. We have patrons that we're going to shout out, and I'm on a streak, Mike. uh, I have so far gotten, I think, at least two comments on YouTube from patrons that were shouting out that they were pleasantly surprised that I pronounced their name correctly.
Yeah, I feel
Uh,
like I feel like you got some challenges this week.
yeah, we'll see about that. Is that I feel very good about the first two, and I'm like 50-50 on the third. I For right now, I've shifted my thinking. I think we should be shouting out three per week because I think one is too few. We really appreciate y'all, and it's not like it takes a ton of time. So here we go. I'm gonna start with the easy one, Alex White. Thank you. I'm gonna start with one that may seem hard, but to me it's easy. That's Drew Buholtz. And then the
That
third
was not how I
one,
would have said that. You
I do know that one.
Okay, all right.
I actually know somebody with that name actually. So
Okay.
that's the way I know it. It's nothing really special. The last one, uh, Michael Easily. Uh,
So I was gonna
Go
say
ahead.
Isley.
That's a possibility. It could also be Iseli if it's
It
like a
could
little bit
be.
more Latin.
Yeah.
I don't know whether we're looking at like Latin or Germanic roots. This is the podcast about the evolution of the human languages, by the way. So thank you for joining us. But you'll have to tell us, Michael, how whether either one of us were right or whether maybe both of us were wrong, which is quite often the case. So you'll have to let us know. This week on the blog, we just posted our Bad Batch unit guide. The next unit guide that's going to be out probably by the time you hear this is going to be Uh, Actually, we're holding a live poll on this right now, and the one that seems like it's coming out ahead is Droidica's, which both of us have been having quite a bit of experience lately. It snuck up on us as from being one of Legion's sort of long running jokes for years, and into being a actually very efficient, some would even say meta unit choice. So I feel like it's a good time to get into that. On the Shatterpoint side, we're going to have a world's preview from Matt Zeus Bronson. And then on the Star Wars Unlimited side, we are going to have a walkthrough of the new mechanics of the upcoming Jump to Lightspeed expansion from Tower Number 9. Mike, have you? I'm curious. Have you been keeping up with Star Wars Unlimited at all, even if it's just sort of from the periphery?
I go to every pre-release.
Okay,
I so look, I played Magic. I played as maybe I play Magic sparsely now. I used to play
sure.
it a lot. Like
Yeah,
you know, we went to all the tournaments and stuff. I'm at the point in my life where buying like a standard deck and having it like rotate every, year or whatever is just like I'm not about that life. I only will play limited formats when I play card games now because it's like I don't have to bring my own stuff. I just show up, you open some packs, you play with the
absolutely.
cards. It's a very like all-inclusive experience. You show up, you play the game, you leave. There's no like I spent $300 on a deck and now I don't like it, but I really have to play it because I have these cards and like I
Yeah.
um it's no strings attached. So that's a very long-winded way of saying I play the pre-releases and that's about it.
Yeah, it's funny that I started off with Star Wars Unlimited like thinking that I was going to get into the sort of like the full real deal for like the first, I mean really like the introductory set and then a little bit in the second expansion. And so and that but that was also like when Legion was sort of in its slumbering pre 2.6 space, and the game honestly didn't have the same attraction to me at that point as it does now. Full disclosure. Um, yeah, that's when I was really into it. And then I think once 2.6 dropped, is that I sort of I shifted to I'm basically the same as you now. Like I went to the Twilight Republic pre-release. I'm gonna go to a Jump to Lightspeed pre-release. I am pretty excited about some of the stuff in the set. Like it's got some neat stuff to where there's leaders that normally they just like deploy on the board as their own dude or lady or alien or whatever robot, and but now they can do that, or they can deploy and jump into the Millennium Falcon, and that
Oh,
there's
really?
all sorts of so like
I
they
haven't
can
looked
just
at any of the cards for the new
yeah,
set,
yeah,
so
it's cool stuff. And so that this is exactly the sort of stuff that that Tower Number 9 is going to be talking about in his article, is like what the new mechanics are in the set. But it's really neat is that like the theme of the set is the pilots. And so for anybody out there who was either a big X-wing head or a big Armada head, because they do not short shrift the capital ships at all. Like
okay.
this set this set has the second version of Chimera. The first one was kind of dull, but this next one is more interesting. It has the second version of the Devastator, Vader's Star Destroyer, which they both are very scary for different reasons. And then for the first time, this one has the Executor,
Okay.
and yeah, it's very expensive, but it has a crazy ability, which is that in Unlimited, there's now in the last set they introduced token mechanics, and
Yeah.
contrary to some of the fears that players had, is that maybe this is a good thing, is that like token mechanics have not sort of like taken over the game and become like a real meta thing. It's been
They were
more
really fun, to be
they're
honest.
fun though, and
Yeah.
so especially for those pre-releases or then later on like sealed deck or booster draft tournaments, is that that's where the token mechanics can actually matter quite a bit, because everybody's going to have access to the token mechanics that came out in that set. And so with the last set, there were on one side you had clone troopers that were a little bit bigger, but you would get fewer of them usually. And then on the other side, you had battle droids to where you would get more of them, but they were weaker. Is that this time it's the same sort of dynamic, but it's with X-Wings and TIE fighters. And so
Okay, cool.
um, what the Executor does is that it is all three of these will trigger this effect is that when it's played, when it attacks, and when it's defeated, it creates three TIE fighters. And so if there's a couple different ways to ambush out the Executor so that you can deploy it and then it'll immediately attack, which means that if you do that, then you'll get like six TIE fighters right off the bat because you both deployed it and you attacked with it.
Seems good.
So it's one of those things to where the game is interesting and fun because there's so many ways to like create a winning game state for yourself, and that pretty much all of those ways don't really evolve until you're in turn at the very least like five or six or seven. But it makes it so that it seems like there's a lot of counterplay and various ways to get it done. Everything I've heard actually is that since they banned exactly one card, which was the original Boba Fett, that was like way too good, is
Yeah.
that the
That was
game
the
had
reason I stopped playing
yeah,
constructing, to
because he
be
was just
honest.
everywhere.
Yeah.
But what I've heard from folks who are playing the game in the constructed format is that there's a decent amount of variety. It's still it's a lot favored on the side of the original leaders and cards that came out. It seems like the first set was actually the most powerful, weirdly enough. But it seems like it's a healthy game, and the good news is that they don't have the same sort of like stock issues that they had
Yeah.
when the game first started. They've done a second run of the core set.
Hashtag
Uh,
cards in memoriam.
yeah, there would be, yeah, there would be quite a few, and as a result of that, I think this is personally a good thing is that the singles market has cooled off. That may change a little bit because they're doing like premium carbonite packs now. So,
Oh,
but the thought is that now, like the people who want to do the real collector stuff are going to be buying the carbonite packs, and the people that just want to play the game are going to buy the regular stuff. And so, in a way, it's going to sort of shield the vast majority of players that just want to play Star Wars cards. So I realize that we've been talking about this for a little while. This is not an unlimited podcast, but I think this is us just shouting out that it's a pretty cool game. If I had infinite time, then I would probably be playing constructed of that game because I definitely enjoy it. I just happen to enjoy the miniatures experience a little bit more. But yeah, you should check out our stuff on thefiftrooper.com/blog about Star Wars Limited. Tower Number 9 is an extremely talented player. You can also check out his YouTube where he does interviews and goes over tournament results. So we are very glad to have him contributing to our site. Okay, so with all that out of the way, we actually have before we get to the algorithms, we have a little bit of hard data to talk about from last week's episode where we were joined by Evan Boris, who helped us out in drafting the turn zero command card plays. And we put up a little survey just so that people could sort of cast their votes about whose was the best. And I have not seen these results. Mike, go ahead and lay it on me.
yeah. All right. Coming in at first with 40% of the vote was Standing Orders, Orbital Strike, Luminous Beings or We,
I
an
knew it.
entire legion, and somebody has to save our skins from yours truly, Mike.
Yay. You did it.
Woo!
You did it, Mike.
I know.
It was funny before we did the episode, I think uh I I clearly had more of a concept in my head about what this was going to be than either you or Evan did. So as everyone heard in the cast when we like got through like four or five clarifying questions before we got started, but it was fun for me to to see your face light up when you realized sort of that there was a like competitive aspect to doing the draft.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that once you like saw a little bit of potential for blood in the water, that's when you were like, okay, I'm definitely gonna do this.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
standing orders, forget you guys, I win.
Welcome to
But
my
it,
headspace,
it's-
man.
boy, must be crowded in there.
Eh.
Yeah, yeah, but it was a lot of fun. So congratulations, Mike. Well done. Very well earned. Who came in second? I mean, which one of the Evans was top Evan at least?
Yep, so coming in at 33.3% of the vote. We do what we do. Darkness descends. We're not programmed at last and given to your anger
Take that,
from
Boris.
yeah, from our own Evan Paul. So yeah. And then change of plans, annihilation looms. We serve the queen, air support, and seize what power we can came in at 26.7%.
It's not really honestly a big difference in terms of votes.
I'm gonna be
Nobody.
honest, I expected to win in much more of a landslide, to be completely
Yeah, too
honest.
bad, bro. Maybe, maybe next draft you'll like truly assert dominance in the way that that feels befitting for you. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. I think we're gonna do it again. And we're always trying to. I keep trying to mix it up and do different things. At some point, I'm probably gonna run out of new ideas, and then we'll circle back over to something that we've done before. But hopefully, we can at least mix it up so that it doesn't get stale. Because Mike, we've talked about this. Is that what is the truly single deadly sin of podcasting?
Being boring, right?
Yeah, it's being boring. So if we do that, then please do unsubscribe, delete, flame. Don't do that, please. But do the other things because at the end of the day, if we're boring to you, then I don't want to be torturing you by
I do. I
making you.
want to torture
Yeah,
you.
Mike does want to torture you. That's fair. Mike is also checking receipts, et cetera, et cetera. But from an official standpoint, no torture, no receipts.
This is not the official stance of the Notorious Scoundrels podcast.
All right. Well, congratulations again. And yeah, I'm sure that we will be drafting or doing something else fun like that in the near future.
Mhm.
But today is going to be a little bit more of a collaboration than a competition. There'll still be space for argument, but this was an idea that came from one of our YouTube comments, and it was it was about the concept of turn zero strategy, and we won't have been the first podcast to have talked about this. But because of that is that my hope was to do something a little bit different. And the angle that I came at this from was that in my day job, both like from a clinical, but especially from a non-clinical point of view, is that we really like algorithms, as in sort of decision trees that guide you towards if this do one thing, if that do the other thing, and uh, like sort of talking about my background with those just a tiny bit right there. I promise I won't be more boring than that. Is that the thing that makes me think of is that these can be extremely helpful in terms of giving folks sort of a shortcut to making the correct decision at any point in time. But I do want to lay down a caveat before we even get started. Hopefully, people listen to this before just like looking at these things and commenting away about how silly we are to try to boil this down to a series of yes and no questions. But the key is that if you allow yourself to be completely ruled by an algorithm, then you are no better than a fairly simple computer program, right? And so obviously, all of us hope to be a little bit better than that. And
AI is
so,
getting pretty good, man. I don't know.
yeah, it's true. Luckily, we haven't gotten to the point to where it's quite ready to completely replace us. But once it does, that's the trick of it is that none of y'all are even going to know. But for right now, I promise that we are still real people Wink, wink. So yeah, at the end of the day, these are meant to be decision-making guides, but that you shouldn't take this as a completely hard truth. Is that there's various situations that may make you sort of weave off of this, or of course you may just not agree with it. Mike actually hasn't seen these in detail yet because I wanted to be able to have sort of a live discussion about it. But I did sort of create some decision trees to start things off with. So before we get into it, do you have any other thoughts or questions about even the concept of doing this?
No, I think unlike last week, I do not need to ask any clarifying questions. I think I understand, and we're ready to full speed ahead.
All right, I'm getting better at this, guys. Uh, yeah, just one thing at a time. Okay, so I am gonna be sharing my screen, so hopefully you are seeing this, Mike.
Yeah, yes, I
All
am.
right. So look at this. Like Zoom, it's figuring out where our faces should be. Wow, technology is great, isn't it? So
Yeah, it's awesome.
yeah, yeah. Hashtag technology. So what we got here is basically this is the layout, and so this is the way that I went about this is that I basically have four images here. We're gonna be like looking at them first. We can make some edits to them, and then the idea is that we can come up with something together that can be something that we can actually publish on the blog, so that people can have sort of a reference point for this if they think it would be helpful. So the way that I thought about it, just to quickly run through all four of the slides, is that I went about it from the perspective of starting with the player who won the role, which will always start as blue player, then going to the player that lost the role for, so like for the blue player's first ban, and then the red player's first ban. After that, it's possible that blue and red player may be different, which is why I stuck to the won the role, lost the role
Sure, sure,
nomenclature here. So then it goes to won the role of band two, and then that's lost the role of band two. Obviously, gonna have to fix that one.
sure.
Really great start for this. But
That's okay. Sometimes
uh,
you copy paste stuff.
yeah, well, it saves time.
It does.
So this is our starting point. Is the you won the role, and so I start off by saying sorry that you won the role. But then we move on by this is the one to where I actually put a decision point before like the decision tree, so to speak, because the first thing that the blue player actually does is that they choose who is contributing primaries and who is contributing secondaries to be like the first face up objective. So here I basically said uh, look at look at your own list and then look at your opponent's list, and then if either one of them is like completely shared for all three of them, then you should choose the other one as the one to contribute. And then if both sets are different in one way or another, then my thought is that as long as there's any differences in both of the sets, that you should just go ahead and contribute the primary. Uh, Mainly, I'm saying that because the primary are just worth more points. Um, it's fair that there's some situations to where your opponent may have a secondary that you really, really don't want. Like the destroy enemy base is probably the one that I'm thinking of most when I make that statement. But I don't know what you think about that before we move on to the rest of this.
I think this is definitely the hardest part in probably constructing this whole algorithm is that we need to decide on like the set of conditions with which we're kind of like springboarding from. I definitely think that if you win the role, you pretty much should always pick primary, um, unless you guys have the exact same primaries.
And that's basically what I'm getting at is that if you have the exact same primaries, then you're not losing much of anything aside from like very edge cases to where yeah, very edge cases. The only thing I'll say from letting your opponent be contributing the primary, since it's the ones that you would have wanted anyway.
I
Uh, And so in that situation, I would use my secondary if like if her primary is the same, and then like for example, I'm playing a slow list and they have destroy enemy base, then I'm gonna start by contributing my secondary because that doesn't have the secondary that could screw me over a little bit.
It's interesting. I actually don't think Destroy Enemy Base is that bad. I think it's fairly kind of like middling as far as like fair to both players. I would actually say that the secondaries that I would be worried more about appearing or not appearing, depending on which side of the table you're on, are I'm gonna get
Bring
the
them to
name.
heal, maybe.
No, I'm gonna get the names of these wrong. They're the one's recon mission.
So recon mission is the one where you have one guy who wants to be close to at least two other objectives or two other units in order to get the point and then lay down a bunch of observation tokens.
Yep, and then the
Surface
other
scan
service scan is
is
the
the
other one.
one to where
Yeah,
you want two in neutral territory, and then you get the once per game scan of your opponent's objective if they drop it.
yeah. I think both of those are super swingy,
Mm,
to a point that if you're not set up to play them well, you will lose the game if your opponent's able to swing them.
yeah.
And in a way that is like destroy enemy base is sort of like is also set up that way, but it's set up in a way that it's frankly pretty difficult for your to score that objective. It's generally like you're playing a primary objective game, and that's it most of the time, in my experience. And the other two though are just like the game can very easily end like on turn three with both of the scan and recon mission objectives. Just because like you're racking up points real fast, and if somebody gets a swap, it's just a death blow.
With yeah, so like with recon mission, if you like kill their recon unit, then it's extremely bad for them.
Yes,
If
it's basically unwinnable, to be honest. If you kill their recon mission, a recon dude, and they are unable to pick it back up that turn, they should be
yeah,
dead.
they're very much in trouble for sure. Yeah, I've seen recon mission sort of be relatively equal as the game goes on if the recon characters are on opposite sides of each other and they're
Yep,
both kind of like bullying their own sides.
yep.
Is that then you sort of like stay at parity until you figure out some way to get a primary advantage. But I think all of that being said is that I'll quickly say when I was thinking of destroying enemy base is that my thoughts are is that if your opponent's list has fast movers and you don't, is that it puts you at a deployment disadvantage because they they especially they have good order control on their fast movers is that like they would be able to just like zoom at your base if you don't like devote some attention to protecting it.
Yeah.
Um, but either way, I think that like we're relatively on the same page as the fact that there's some secondaries that if they differ in terms of like the value to you and your opponent that you would want to make sure that you could avoid those. But I still think, at least in my head, that compared to the idea that there's certain primaries that you think your opponent would have an advantage on compared to you, um, is that the secondary differences like matter less on average. I think I'm thinking of like if you are like a B1 swarm list and you get something like I think that like breakthrough wouldn't necessarily be ideal for a list like that, right? If you just like have a bunch of B1s and you're just like sort of act swarming.
I think
Um,
that really depends.
yeah,
Just because like a B1 swarm list is like, the B1 swarm's only like 200 points. You
that's
still
that's
you
true.
still
That's
got
true.
800 points more of list.
So I don't know, like
So,
close the pocket, would that be worse for them because they're gonna die pretty quickly if they have to swarm the middle?
I mean,
Uh,
maybe I don't know. I've really changed my tune on how I feel about that, I think, over the past. 6 months or whatever. I think originally I was like, oh man, close the pocket. Like, not super great for swarmy lists, definitely good for clones. But as time has moved on and like we've learned more, I still think it's like just better to have more activations on close the pocket. It's you just have to manage your range bands and engagement properly in order,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and I do think that like if your list is set up to run recon mission and service scan properly and your opponent is not, I would slam those secondaries way faster than any primaries that would blow them out of the water.
Yeah.
Um,
So I think that maybe what we can maybe we can rephrase this in like a little bit of a way by saying that if both sets are different, because again, like if your opponent has the same set as you, then there's pretty much no
there's
reason
really,
to
yeah,
not use like the other one. But if both are different, then use this set that has more, or use the set where your opponent has more potential advantage
or
is like the way
disadvantage, right? Your opponent has
well,
more.
to where your opponent would have more potential advantage from using their own cards is what I
Oh,
mean.
sure, yes.
Yeah.
And I think what we mean by that generically is like, okay, um, if you both have the same primaries, let's say that you're both set up for like breakthrough and uh intercept the signals and stuff, so you're probably like higher activation lists, but you've got a force user and they don't, like you want to kind of slam recon mission
Yeah.
like 100%. Or if you're a separatist list, a high act separatist list versus like a high act republic list, like surface scan's gonna be way better for you because you probably have two hardy units that can hold your boxes and be okay. Whereas like the rebel list, while it's got like a lot of things, they're
Yeah.
all extremely fragile, right? Those are obviously just like two examples. But I definitely think that you want to be taking here in the deciding on primary and secondary, you need to be like, where am I getting the most bang for my buck? Where can I possibly like what you want to try and set up the most this whole process just from the top down, you're trying to
Yeah.
set up the most unfair game for your opponent as possible.
Yeah. Of course.
Um, so yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
if
So
that
I just rephrased this to be a little bit cleaner. Just like if both sets are different, use the set where you have a higher potential advantage.
yeah, okay.
Uh, and so again, that's the decision before you get to the band. So then like the rest of these algorithms, because these are what the rest of the decision points are, is that these are the band decisions. So in getting to that, um, I think that given the change we just made, is that this is basically this one would change a little bit to be uh, um, would your opponent have an advantage on the card that they contributed? And then the solution to that would be to replace it with your own card.
Yeah. Um, I do think that we need to talk about the order of um questions, the like true false order here.
Sure, sure. And so I think that like let's just run through my thinking of it first, and then yeah,
Okay.
then let's like zoom out. And because I figure this would happen is that we would do a little bit of switcheroonies. But
Yep.
so yeah, my first priority is blue players, since again there's going to be one set that you contributed. It's relatively unlikely that you're going to want to mess with that one, but that actually is a potential thing to do. So the way I thought about it first, does your opponent have an advantage on the objective that they contributed? And then if no, then I think about, does your opponent have advanced intel face up? If yes, I would cycle their advantage, and if no, then I would go to the next one. Do the next one that I put was that do you have a car an advantage other than advanced intel face up? And if the answer is yes, then to cycle to dig for it. If no, then to move on to the next one. And then pretty much the last one is the is this is where I got to the point to where okay, if the secondary that my opponent put down is actually one that I kind of like, and or if the objective my opponent contributed is one that I don't mind at all, and they don't have advanced intel up, I do have advanced intel up, then that's the point to where, from my line of thinking, you would look at the objective that you contributed, and again, that's more wording that I will edit for the final PDF. Is that you would look at the one you contributed and basically think about, is there one of the other two in my pile that I would actually like more than that one? And then you can cycle your own objective. And but if you absolutely love everything and you think that like they don't have advanced intel, you do, you love both the objectives, then at that point you can't take blue player because you already are a blue player. So that would be the only point to where you would pass. So that's the main thing that that's the way I was thinking about it. But I'm curious about whether you would switch the order or argue with like the decisions here.
Um, so I think I definitely would swap the first two questions you have. I lead with does your opponent have advanced intel face up? I think if my opponent has advanced intel face up at any point during the ban process, it is the first thing to go. Advanced intel is busted. It is like, and not only is it busted, it makes or breaks a lot of the objective play. Um, it is so unfair and
Oh,
in making an unfair board state
I'm
to a
100% with you.
yeah.
The one thing I was thinking about here in terms of because I thought about putting it first, it actually sneak preview it is first in the at the very least the next one.
Mhm.
But the thought that I had is that if you're blue and you start by getting rid of red's advanced intel, it does create a situation to where if they're happy with everything else, that if they dig two more times, then they'll actually get a 1 in 3 chance of drawing advanced intel when they reshuffle and then put their advantage back.
Yeah.
So that was the only reason of why for this first one I made the objective a bigger priority because then if you get to blue band, if you get to like won the roll band two, and your opponent has advanced intel face up, is that they would only be able to reshuffle that if they hadn't already uh, if they had already like shuffled their advantages once. But if their advanced intel was like if they top decked it, so to speak, then they're not going to want to get off of it because you're going to leave it alone. But then if you start by cycling it, they'll have a chance to get it back. Whereas if you cycle it with your second ban, then they won't have a chance to get it back.
I hear you. I also think though that if they're gonna spend both their bans on cycling their deck for a 1/3 chance to get advanced intel, you get to basically play a primary, a secondary, and have like a pretty good chance of having advanced intel yourself.
Yeah.
Um, because they're doing nothing but cycling their own thing. And I think if you're basically like winning in 3 out of 4 categories, and sometimes they spike the ball and hit the 1/3,
Yeah.
like okay, like all right, good talk. But I'm not sure that it's actually worth giving up all your other bands um to just get a 1/3 chance because it's also going to allow you to get a 50-50 chance um on your next band to hit advanced intel if you don't already have it, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Which is better odds than what they're taking. So I actually think that banning it here is definitely fine as a first
Okay.
reaction. I do think that like if you choose to ban something else, can the second one sometimes be stronger? Yeah, but I think you're putting yourself in a situation where they all of a sudden, like if you ban advanced intel from the jump, you're putting them in a situation where they have to make a choice between actually interacting with you in turn zero or trying
Or
to
digging for a 1 out of
rotate.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so I think you convinced me for the majority of cases. It's I think so. I think that yeah, I'm convinced that we'll switch 1 and 2 uh, in terms of priorities here. I may put like sort of a little asterisk statement, which is that in a situation to where your like both of your objective decks, like if you're running basically the same list
If they're
and
identical, you
and
definitely
both of
should
your
wait.
decks, then yeah, you should wait to get rid of their advanced intel, because then they won't be able to dig for it, because again, that's a situation to where like they only have to care about like their own and their opponent's advantages. So but I agree that that is more of a that it's more of an outlier than sort of being a rule. Um, and so I am curious. I'm guessing that you're on the same page of that. Digging out your opponent's objective is more important than digging for your own advanced intel with the first ban. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. So like
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
you have cunning deployment up, but they have an objective that you don't like, is that you should first like get rid of that objective you don't like, and then it's like once you're in, I think basically probably what we're going to be getting to is that digging for your own advanced intel is only something you should do when you're satisfied with the way that the objectives are laid out.
I think I would like to phrase it a little bit differently than that.
Sure.
But I agree.
Yeah.
I would what you want to be doing is setting it up so that your opponent's last ban is deciding between messing with your advanced intel or the primary and secondary that you've gotten to decide.
Yeah.
Right, like that's ideal.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to set that up unless you flip advanced intel with your second ban.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Because yeah, like you're at a little bit of an inherent disadvantage with blue player, and the strategy that you just laid out is the way that you can mitigate that a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I think that we would switch the first two priorities here, and then I'm guessing no objections with the last couple here is that if you're happy with the objectives, you're happy with the advanced intel situation, then maybe maybe one of your other primaries or one of your other I guess we can change this to be like any of your other objectives that you think would like, if there's anything in, sorry, I should say that because this is won the roll ban 1, is that you may cycle your own objective. I'll change primary to your own objective here. If there's another one in your pile that you think would be a little bit better than what you currently have face up.
I think this is complicated. I think this is maybe the most complicated part of this whole system is that like
Interesting.
let's say that you brought three objectives in your pile, right? A, B, and C.
Yeah.
C is the worst in the given matchup. B is the second best. A
Yeah.
is the best, right? You flip to start, you flip B.
You flip B, right. And then because then you're 50-50 about, do you make things worse for yourself or better for yourself?
Right.
Because if you make it
And
worse for yourself, then you would maybe be tempted to spend your second ban going to the last one, which is not ideal.
yes. So I'm in the camp of if you flip B, you don't do anything. I am I am I am
I agree with
a
that.
the chips are down, like I'm already kind of winning. Let's just cash out and go to the bank, right? Um Now, if you're there's you can gamble a little bit and sometimes you lose, right? I don't know, but I think the safe thing is that if you flip B in that specific circumstance based on your opinion of the objectives and stuff, you hold on B. But
Yeah.
if you flip C, like obviously you'll flip a new one, right?
Yeah. So
Um,
I'm
but
changing this.
flipping C is the only time that I think that you should be banning is when it's definitely an upgrade, and I feel like I don't know.
So yeah, I'm changing this to be, you'll you'll flip your own objective if both of the other cards are better than the current one.
Yeah. And I also think that there's a little bit of um how do I want to say this? Kind of like mental overpower is if you go all the way down this chart and you say I'm gonna pass. Right? Um like your opponent's like, "Oh, I'm in trouble." Or maybe you made a mistake and your opponent knows enough that you made a mistake, but
Yeah, we actually get to that at the very end about you know, about what are the situations in which especially red player would actually pass. It's that it probably means that blue player was asleep.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, as blue player is that like there are gonna be some times to where the board as it is truly ideal, and so it like there are gonna be situations to where you may be lucky enough that passing is actually the right thing to do as blue player. So it is
And
important to keep that in mind.
yeah, to be clear, the times where that's going to be is where whatever deck you made them flip is the same as yours. And they flipped like your A and you flipped your A or B on whichever one
Right,
you supplied. You
right.
also have you hit the jackpot and hit advanced intel problem and they didn't.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the situation.
Yeah. So it's not going to happen often, but it is at least possible. Okay, so um, to recap is that uh, briefly recap is that to start out with, if your opponent has advanced intel, then flip that, and then next, if you don't like the objective that your opponent contributed, then flip to one of yours. If you don't have advanced intel face up, then you can dig for that, and then after that, if you looked at the objective you contributed and you like both of the other options more, then you can cycle your own. And then after that is the point where you're passing. So we will uh, go to the red one, and I am going to move these comments over to the side a little bit. When I make the final, I'm going to reference the video so that we can actually have a clean PDF for all of y'all. So excuse the clutter at the bottom, but I do just want to sort of clean things up for um, the discussions that we have about the next couple. And I think this will probably generally fall into place after we do this one, but we'll see how it goes. So as a red player, it's like congratulations on losing the role, first of all. But otherwise, is that the um, we may just do the same flip here. Is that I again like here I was extra focused on advantages, but we may want to do the same thing that we did before, to where um, we move the opponent's advanced intel up here, which actually this was the problem with the way I originally constructed this is that I basically left that part out of here somehow. So I think that unless you think that things would be any different, is that we would make the first priority like flipping your opponent's advanced intel if they have it up. Would you agree to that?
Yeah. Yeah. Um uh, well, so I mean this comes back to the if your opponent already has advanced intel up and you have something else that you can ban,
Mm,
I do think you can hold it as red if you want to, because you definitely are going to get to ban it for sure.
right. I think the the question would come up about because like you're going to be in that same situation with the objective that your opponent put down. It may be like at this point your opponent may have contributed both objectives technically
Yes.
because they would start with their primary and then contribute their secondary or whatever. And so I think that the question for me would be if your opponent uh, if your opponent has an objective that you hate and they have advanced intel face up, then like which does either one of those take a priority over the other
Uh,
in terms of the first ban?
I mean, I think the answer is you ban advanced intel first. The reason for that is you banning advanced intel, they definitely can't interact with that. At this point, it's too late, probably, unless they like cycled theirs to flip advanced intel, which I guess is possible.
Yes, I guess
But
if they cycled theirs to get it, then you would leave that for last.
right.
But if they top decked it, then you would do it first.
Then yes, that is how I would go
Okay.
about doing that. Because if you, the thing is right here, if you ban their primary or secondary, they can just kind of like undo what you did. Whereas like you can set this up so that they can't undo the advanced intel flip, but then you can undo their primary or make them kind of like waste a ban
Right.
if things are already ideal for them, and then kind of lock in a primary or secondary you know you're going to want to play.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely in the camp of if they decided to fish for advanced intel on their first ban, and hit it, I would wait. If they didn't fish and this was the original top deck, meaning there are two more left in the pile, you definitely ban it here because it's likely that you're if you ban something else, they can just kind of un mulligan your ban if they want to.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It does create this interesting aspect to where um, just like the differing nature of the way that objectives are contributed versus advantages to where like both opponents are always contributing one advantage to themselves each, whereas with objectives is that either one or both opponents may actually be contributing to the pool that everybody's going to share.
Yeah.
Like that's part of the reason why you end up in these interesting if then scenarios. Okay, so basically, if your opponent cycled into advanced intel, then you should hold off. But otherwise, if they had top decked it, then this is a good time to get rid of it. And then I think that the next question would basically be, would your opponent have advantage on either one of a would your opponent have advantage on either one of the objectives? I think I can maybe rephrase this to say, like, which of the objectives is your opponent sort of beating you the worst on, and then you would want to replace that objective as the next priority, right?
Assuming, I think this goes back to the ABC thing, that assuming that you don't have something in your deck than what's worse than already out there, right? Like
Mm,
so, like let's say that let's add a D to the ABCD list where A is the best objective in your deck. B is what your opponent let's say A and B are what's the best two things in your deck. Your opponent flipped C and you have a D in your deck for this matchup for whatever, you know. Do you take the bet of potentially flipping into something that's even worse for you? Um, I don't- I think this is also very complicated at that point.
that's where it's more of a judgment call, right? Because if you're in a situation to where you think that you're already quote in a losing position with C, and that D would make you an even more in a losing position, but A and B would put you in a winning position,
Yeah.
like then the math actually does favor contributing your objective, right? Especially because if you feel so strongly about it, then after blue does whatever they're going to do is that because you lost the roll is that you're still going to be able to dig for either A or B with your second ban.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think that uh, you know, once we get done with all this, is that I may like try to boil this down to something that's a little bit more of a tighter explanation. But um, to me, is that if two out of your three options are better than the one that's on the table, then you should probably flip into it, is basically the way that I think about it.
Unless your other option is to ban something that is 100% upgrade, right?
Mm, that's
Like
fair.
I think like if that's the situation with the primaries, but the secondaries are your C is on the table and your A and B are in the deck, like I would flip a secondary probably. Because I'm like 100% guaranteed to get something that is like optimal for me.
Yeah.
Um, obviously it also depends on like is something in that slot that is just like absolutely positively unplayable. I'm sort of the opinion that that's generally not true in most matchups in the game presently. But
Yeah.
I do think if you're playing against like a 15 activation like Rebels or CIS list and um you're at like 9 or 10 activations for whatever reason, like you're probably actually dead if you're play breakthrough.
Yeah.
Like there are situations where that comes up. So you kind of have to make a judgment call there. And I do think that this is sort of where like the algorithm thing, like you kind of have to almost have two algorithms, one for like if this variable hits is X and this variable is Y, there's like a branching.
Yeah. I think that, you know, PowerPoint has so many options in it, is that I think that once we get done with this, is that it'll be a little bit of an interesting challenge for me to figure out how to visualize that. But yeah, I think that's well taken. And I think that we can move on by mentioning this, assuming that we agree about the objective piece, is that uh, obviously this is one of those areas to where using your own judgment is a super important part of this, because we're adding in this new variable now, which is table side. Uh, which obviously as blue player, you when you started as a blue player, you don't have to worry about that for your first ban. You have it, but when you are red player, lost the role, you don't have that to start out with, and so this is where the question comes up to me about uh, is is one side substantially better than the other, and obviously like there's nothing that you can put into an algorithm about what that word substantially means. It's doing a lot of work in this situation, so it gets to your own judgment. But I don't know whether you think that this item actually belongs in a different place in the algorithm in the grand scheme of things.
Um, where is it present? Oh, I see.
It's
Wow, yeah,
after
yeah.
objective, which would also
Um,
be after advanced intel. It's tough, right? Because like there's some maps to where maybe one side is better, but it's not that much better. But like let's say the map is kind of heinously one sided and they have a bunch of long range shooters, is that may be enough to sway you.
I mean, I think that this is tough for me because I think this is if you're playing on a table that is built for competitive Legion, I don't think this should be nearly high up this list. I
Hmm.
think I think it should basically be the last thing on the list. However, if you're playing at a tournament that doesn't have enough terrain, this I think this question could even be first, depending on
Yeah.
your list. You know,
So I think that what we can do is that we can put it we can move it to be last, but then basically put an asterisk on it, to where we're saying like if it is like an extremely unoptimized table, is that you may need to use your own judgment to move this farther up the list.
yeah, like basically, I would say that it's last with the assumption that you're playing on Nick Bodner's tables.
Yeah, yeah.
Or something similar to that,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
You know, and if I think uh even just like watching the latest LVO and stuff, like I would say that there's somewhere in the realm of like 20% more terrain pieces on the board on most of the tables that are being played in high
Yeah.
level competitive Legion events than there were in the previous edition. And I think as long as people are putting the adequate amount of terrain on the board, you shouldn't need to worry about this. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think that you should having to pick table side because you're going to get blown off the board on turn one if you don't is that means the board is bad.
Yeah, it
You
means
know,
that mistakes were made, but of course, like you you always deal with the situation that you're in, right? And so I think that I'm with you that we would move that to be the last thing, but that we basically put that caveat about, sometimes you run into bad boards. I will agree with you is that since the advent of 2.6 is that I think that running into way too open boards is less common
yeah.
than it used to be. I think that was partially driven by the fact that like very early in 2.6 is that you had stuff like snail tanks and arc squads that were just like obliterating everybody from long range, and so as a way to try to basically make the game more competitive, it became clear that you needed a little bit more terrain for this game. And and so I think that's been a good thing. This is where our European listeners are gonna start shouting at the screen
Like we
about,
always
well,
played the
that
game
was
this
that was
way.
never that was never a problem in my country.
Yeah, yeah.
That was my best hoity-toity angry London man accent.
I would like to put
So
a second asterisk on this though,
yeah,
and that is you actually don't care if you brought aqua drives.
yeah. It's fair. I like the idea of that, but I will say now that I've been playing Aquas for a bit, is that it is nice when a building is such that you only need one Aqua model to sort of like complete your wall, and you
Sure,
can
sure.
make the wall even bigger.
Yeah, that's
So terrain still matters a little bit, but not nearly as much as it does
fine.
when you don't have any line of sight blockers that are marching along with your army.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and so to recap, I know that like this screen is very busy, but again, this is a working session. You guys are seeing how the stew is getting boiled, so to speak. But we're gonna start with that advanced intel, like ban it if they top decked it. Otherwise, leave it alone for now. And then the objective ban or the objective replacement with the caveats we attach to that. Then after that, I think that's where we get to the point where you would be digging for your own advanced intel uh, if they don't have advanced intel up, and if you are okay, I shouldn't say okay. If you don't actually want to flip any objectives, then that's the point to where you would dig for your own advanced intel. Do you agree with that?
I would say nine times out of ten,
Yeah.
yes. I think there is some situations where waiting until for the 50-50 shot to um is fine, but yes, I generally
Although
think
I think that because of the way the back and forth is that, like, let's say you have cunning and your other two in the deck are ordnance and advanced intel, is that if you dig and you hit advanced intel, then that forces your opponent to deal with that for blue band two.
it does.
If you dig and hit ordnance, then you actually secure advanced intel for yourself.
Yes,
Uh,
100%. But I'm of the mind that like that is way better than them banning your advanced intel. Like I personally would rather, I think, take a coin flip to 100% get it than to
hmm.
force them into a situation where um they have to make a hard decision. A
Yeah.
hard
So
decision is nice. I just think advanced intel matters more than objectives most of the time.
that's fair. I'd say I guess that math may boil down to um, sort of like the damage, so to speak, that you think your opponent could do by flipping one of the objectives again.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's interesting. Is that uh, if I was a mathematician like you, then I would be like sort of like thinking about the various odds about when does it matter about when
Like,
the 50-50 is, because it's either the way I was looking at it is that it's a 50-50 where one of them does guarantee you advanced intel. The other one guarantees that you don't have it, but it does force your opponent to deal with it.
yes,
And I guess the way I was thinking about it is that that way the math shakes out to be almost the same, except you get that information sooner.
that's fair. I think the way that I would look at it is if your opponent has a like generally speaking isn't gonna gain a lot of advantage from uh banning your objectives,
Yeah.
take the coin flip.
Okay. I'll write that down so I
If
don't forget it.
if your objectives are just like way better for you than they are for them, yeah, you can put it, you can, and you're ready to put them in that hard spot right here, do it. But I think your objectives have to be substantial. And this comes back to like breakthrough and intercept signals and like recon mission and service scan being like pretty skewy in that like if you are in a situation where you are able to skew the game with the objectives and they feel like they have to get one of those off the table, or destroy enemy base, like you were saying. I think you can kind of do what you're kind of talking about.
Yeah.
But I think if your objective decks are pretty neutral as far as like who's winning, who's losing on that, you definitely wait and take the coin flip.
Yeah. I see what you mean by that. So yeah, that's another thing to where yeah, see this is why it's good is that I thought that I thought that I had something relatively straightforward and you've been helping out by showing about how there actually are a decent number of points that would sway your decision one way or the other.
There's definitely
Um,
like a lot of points of inflection, and I think the biggest thing that makes it difficult is that you just whenever you flip a card, unless it's the last one in the deck,
mhm.
you don't know what you're flipping.
Yeah,
Um, I haven't decided if that's good or bad yet, really. There are good things and bad things about it. Um, but I do think that coming up with an algorithm would be like much easier if you could like pick which one came out of your deck.
yeah. But that would also like be less fun, though, right?
Well, that's sort of how it used to be, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Where all of the information was face up is that
Yeah.
it was it was a different sort of thing. Is that it was the difference between playing X-Wing where random dice rolls could really mess you up and playing Armada where if you had the right list, then you would know what all your dice rolls are before you even roll them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's a little bit of that
Mm.
dichotomy, staying with the Asmodee games. Okay, and then so recap real quick is that we talked about the reasons why you would start off cycling the advantage or not, and then cycling the objective or not, and then after that, digging for your own advanced intel or not. After that is where you get to the point of um, cycling your own objective if it's that scenario to where you drew C and you like both A or B better. And then after that, you may as well just like take blue player at that point. Um, if you end up liking one side a little bit more than the other, because you'll by that point, by the time it comes to choose sides, is that you'll know what the objective is, which could uh, change your opinion about which side is actually better because you have different deployment zones. So yeah, like there's no situation where you should ever pass with the first ban as red player because there's always that chance that taking blue player will actually be good for you. Okay, so um, the next one is blue band 2. I'm gonna get rid of all this stuff again so that we clean up the way things look. Is that sorry about that. Huh.
Yeah, I
All
think you
right.
just cycled one extra screen or something.
Okay. There we go. Okay. So won the role band two, since again, you may not be blue player anymore by this point, is that uh so here's where I think that we're gonna do the same thing that we've been doing, is that we're gonna move the we're gonna assume that the player edge doesn't really matter a ton because it's hopefully a competitive table, and
Yep.
so we'll be moving that one down. I think that when I was making this, I was thinking just about even the concept that your opponents, like, that there could be one side that's like really really better, because
Yeah.
that can be game breaking, as you mentioned. But I think that making the assumption that they're relatively equal because it's a good competitive table is better for the algorithm.
I'd
Um,
also like to say that like I this is gonna be controversial. I think terrain
I'm ready.
matters less in this format than it did before. Um,
I would have argued with you before the first points change.
yeah,
Uh,
that's fair.
yeah, when
Um,
arcs were just mopping, is that terrain actually mattered quite a bit. Because if you had an open side and your opponents, like, either arcs or hyped up snail tanks, were just gonna obliterate you, is that it mattered a lot. But that's not the meta anymore, right? Is
no,
that the threats out there, the meta threats, are much less on the side of like big long range shooting, or long range sniper shooting. And so now I agree with you, is that terrain, it feels like it has in some ways never mattered less than it does now,
yeah.
even though we actually have more terrain on average than we used to.
I also
Uh,
think a piece of that is that I think that generally speaking, managing your range bands has become also like very, very important. Not that it never was before, because it obviously was like a very important. That's been a very important part of Legion since like day one.
yeah, exactly.
Um, but I think there was a lot of relearning with the range bands
Totally.
going into 2.6, and I think it definitely took me like a month or two to kind of like get my head straight on where my units needed to be in order to score the objectives properly. And if your opponent is actually doing the things that they need to be doing to actually like score the objectives, like everybody is just going to be range two of each other.
Yeah.
Like it, and generally when you're range two of something, the terrain doesn't matter a ton. It just doesn't.
It totally correct. Is that in some ways, when you're at that range, is that the POI itself actually becomes the most important terrain on the board.
Like you'll always have
Uh,
heavy cover. Like
exactly.
it's just
Yeah.
like what the terrain is determining is what line of sight blockers you have, not the
Yeah.
cover, because
Yeah.
you're gonna have the cover you need probably, because you're trying to contest the objective.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. So I agree with that. It's an interesting thing that I hadn't thought of, and it's unfortunately reminding me about the fact that initially, when 2.6 came out, I thought that I would be able to leave alone like two of the three articles that I wrote about like how to lose less at Legion. But I think I am gonna have to rewrite the one about the winning the fight, the first one that I wrote,
sure.
because the I initially thought that the dynamics of that would be the same. But now, as we've seen the game, is that it's shown that it's actually quite different, which means that the only article of the three that I wrote, where it was like one was winning the fight, the other one was having a game plan for winning objectives. Obviously, that one changed, and then the third one was not blaming the dice. Is
Uh,
that the third one is the only one that's still true? So I'm gonna have to mess around with edits to the other two, just add it to the pile, so to speak. Okay,
yep.
so we're going to be moving the one about picking the board edge down. I think that we're also going to be moving the your opponent having advanced intel uh, up, e- even if it like they flipped to advanced intel to the point to where with their second ban, like now they're gonna have the 1 in 3 chance to like get back to it. But this is your last chance to affect things, and if they have advanced intel face up, you should get rid of it.
Probably.
Probably. Uh,
There's definitely the world where like if there's a primary objective face up that you
that you
actually can't
hate.
play,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They really
um,
hate.
then you're gonna have to suck it up. But um,
Yeah. So
yeah,
I may phrase this as like I may phrase it as is your opponent is your opponent's face or like is a face up objective or your opponent having advanced intel, like which one of those situations is worse
yeah,
for you? And then you're gonna want to like deal with that situation.
yeah. I think that's
I'll figure out a
fair.
way to phrase that basically, but
Um,
I think that's the idea.
definitely. I think most of the time you're probably banning advanced intel here. I
Yeah.
think the win percentages between most of objectives are like pretty neutral. Um,
Advanced
and
intel is in the mid 60s.
yes, it
Uh,
is.
or low to mid 60s depending on the time frame you look at, but it's pretty righteous.
Yes, it is.
And
It's similar to playing like EXD at Worlds. Like
right,
your win
right.
rate at the start of turn zero is pretty high if you have advanced intel in
A-
your.
As a reminder, is that the win percentage of Republic for the first part of Legion 2.6 when they had all the busted stuff, that win percentage was 55%.
Yeah.
So you compare that level of dominance to the fact that having advanced intel is over 60%, it's pretty freaking dominant.
Yeah. No, it's so
So
I
yeah,
I have some thoughts about that. Maybe
sure.
now is not the time. I
Well,
don't
yeah,
know.
no, now's not the time. We're trying to build the algorithm, Mike. But believe me, we're gonna try and stay not boring. We're gonna have plenty of opportunities to talk about the small letters pros and big letters cons of the nature of advanced intel. Um, to preview my opinion on it, but right now we're going to focus on the algorithm. So if we have that one being the first, and then the table edge being the last thing, is that I think that we're probably going to be in a similar situation to the other list, to where if you don't have to worry about advanced intel, then you should be looking at which advantage does flipping one of them put you in the best chance of having a better position. And so that like here, you are going to have to take into account a little bit like what's left in your pile, because it could be that you could be that you started with your primary, red started by replacing with their primary, which means that you have two left in your pile, and then you have to do the math of that ABC thing. So let's say if the face up objective is B level, and then you have an A and a C in your own pile, is that probably just like last time, is that you should leave that alone, right?
You should leave it alone. I think the only situations where you should take an A, try and flip to an A instead of a C
Yeah.
is uh, if you're willing to gamble that day, basically.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's like it's one of those things where this is the advice I would give you 98% of the time, but if I was at Worlds in the finals and I was looking to basically if I was willing to like make a bet to set myself up as best as possible,
Yeah.
I would be like, you know what? I'll roll the dice once to see if I can slam dunk this because this is the game that matters, right? But if we're talking about making the correct amount of decisions to, win the most amount of games, you should probably stick with B. Um,
Yeah. And I think that there's variables, because it's kind of like, is A a grand slam, but C is a like a kind of bad day, versus A being a single and C is the worst day you've ever had.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
like
yeah. Yeah.
it's all of this is on a spectrum, and so that's where sort of like that level of personal judgment is going to come into play.
It's
But
definitely
yeah,
heavily dependent on the list you're playing, right? Like
sure,
this is not something we can like black and white kind of be like, this is how it's gonna be, because
yeah.
depending on the list that you've constructed and crafted, and unless you've net decked a list from our website, and read Evan's article on how it plays, like we're not gonna be able to like give you a strict yes, no. You're gonna have to.
And even then, I may have been completely off in terms of the strategy that I shared with you. So, it's like buyer beware. But yeah, I hear it is that there's so many variables, but I do still think that I do still think that we're coming up with something that can be useful as sort of the skeleton of decision making. Um, and uh, and so okay, so we talked about advanced intel, we talked about objectives. Are we on the same page that basically if your opponent doesn't have advanced intel and you you would be at risk of making things worse for yourself by flipping an objective, then that's usually going to be the point at which, uh, if you still have a chance of like a 50-50 chance of getting your own advanced intel, then that's the point at which you would probably want to do that, right?
Yeah, you definitely take it here because unlike the scenario we talked about last time where it's like there's like a 50-50 to either get advanced intel or put your opponent in a hard space, like you're
This is your
kind of
last chance.
this is your last chance,
Yeah.
and best case scenario is you're putting your opponent in a hard place.
Yeah.
And this is, when everybody was like, "Oh man, being blue player off the jump is really bad." This is the moment that it is bad.
Exactly.
Right here in
Yeah.
the decision tree, is because the best thing that can happen here is that you make your opponent make a hard choice. You're not going to get what you want.
Yeah. It's sad. It's sad but true. You can't always get what you want when you roll too many crits on the
Five
on the
black
starting
dice.
roll of the game.
Yeah.
Okay, and then after that is to the point of you get to the relatively low on the scale decisions like that we'd already talked about, such as cycling your objectives if you're at the C compared to A and B, or if none of that's like this is a situation to where it may be that everything is truly awesome for you and you like if you already have blue player then you can pass, but again I feel like we're getting to the point that that scenario is so incredibly unlikely that it's like not even worth mentioning.
I'd go as far as to say that it's impossible for that scenario to
it's
actually
it's it's
occur.
impossible
Because red
unless your
player has
opponent
just
is
done something.
asleep.
Yes. Yeah. If red player passed, which is they definitely should not have,
Yeah.
there's literally no circumstances in which they should pass. Like there's also no
That's a good point.
circumstances in which you should pass here.
it,
So
it, if
if
your
you
opponent passed as first red band, then that's where I would be like, this is a new player, and I'm literally going to speak up and say, hey, you should probably take blue player if you like the way the cards are, because you
Yes,
never know.
100%. And then in that circumstance, you would just take it back here if you were
Yeah,
also, so like
exactly.
there's no circumstance where as blue player you should pass your second ban.
Yeah, unless you're a jerk and bullying a new player, which we very much frown upon in this podcast. Okay, so it's fine to bully players, uh, not from the personality sense, but if you want to try to beat up on players that are not new to the game, as long as you're nice to them, otherwise is that's fine. But please do not overpower and bully new players to scare them away from our game. I can put my stamp of disapproval and finger wagging on that one.
You heard it here first, folks. Evan has advocated that there are situations where bullying people is okay.
Sort of. As long as it's friendly bullying,
Okay.
which
All
I've
right.
been known to do a time or two. So the first thing I'm going to do is to very subtly write lose the roll band two instead of one on here. And then I think that word, I think that this is it's pretty similar. Like this is the easiest one, right? Because this is the one to where there are the fewest variables in front of you, and to where the like your opponent is not going to have any say in it. From a like basically the first thing that I would do here is that if your opponent has advanced until you get rid of it, again with that caveat of if your opponent's objectives are like heinously um, worse for you than having advanced intel up, then you would do that instead.
I'd like to put a secondary caveat in
Sure,
there.
sure.
If you both have advanced intel up, it's less of an issue.
Mm. Of course, like, but getting rid of your opponent's advanced intel is like as good as getting your own, right?
Um,
Basically.
uh, in theory, yes.
Yeah.
I think here again it depends. You're kind of if you're at parity on advanced intels and there is a gain you can make somewhere else that is better, take it. I do think nine times out of ten you ban their advanced intel,
Yeah, I
but
agree.
um yeah, there are definitely situations where I feel I would feel less bad about not banning their intel if mine is also up.
Yeah. I think as we're going through this, is that a way that I may think of it when I come up with the final one is that there are a lot of decisions that are like it's the same sort of decision, but that you can make it at different points. Like I think a good example is that B is up, and then you have to choose between A and C. Like when we were talking about that, is that there may be a way to sort of like have like shortcut the language a little bit. I'll have to see if I can get creative, but yeah, here we would start with the advanced intel decision, and then after that, I think that you're going to the one that we've talked about before, which is the you look at the objectives that are up, and if there is a flip there that is unlikely to put you at a disadvantage and significantly more likely to put you at an advantage, then you would want to do that flip. Like whether that's cycling your own again or getting rid of your opponent's objective and replacing it with yours. Um, this is another place to where, just like with the won the roll band two, to where you're gonna need to keep in mind about what's left in your deck when you make that call. So that is a factor there. And then uh, although now that I'm saying all that, is that something that should actually come before that is that if you did get to the as red player, if you got to the point to where you started with cunning and then you flipped ordnance, and then now you have the chance to flip into what is guaranteed advanced intel, like that actually should take priority over messing around with the objectives usually. Again,
Yes,
unless
for
there's an
sure.
objective that you really hate.
I think what's more interesting is like if they have advanced intel up and you don't,
Mm-hmm.
like how you handle that situation. I think you probably just ban their advanced intel, but um there's definitely like nuances in having like the pass tokens and
Yeah.
uh, stuff like that.
And then I think that maybe this isn't such an interesting question, but this is where there is going to be the possibility that your opponent started by banning your advanced intel, and then you decided that you're going to go on the dig quest, and you've ended up at the point to where if you get rid of the current advantage, then you're going to shuffle your deck and then put a random of the three in there. Is like when is that when is that a better choice than flipping one of the objectives, for
I think
instance?
I think basically you've got to look at the primary and the secondary objective and be like, I'm okay with playing this game.
Yeah.
If you look at the primary and secondary and you're like, yeah, I can play this, and that's how you feel about it, take
Yeah.
the 1 in 3. If you look at it and you're like, that's really not great for me. This is the point where you get a 100% say in like what's going to happen. So, if there's a really crappy objective setup for you, definitely take it over fishing.
Yeah.
Um, you
But yeah,
know,
digging for your own advanced intel is something you should only do if you're a-okay with the objective layout as it is.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, taking that 1/3, like if you're in the situation every time and you have like digging for advanced intel is probably going to actually net you close to like a 49 to 50% win rate because
Yeah.
1/3 of the time you're going to hit advanced intel and the other 2/3 of the time you're not.
Yeah.
So those should average out in theory. Whereas banning something that's actually really bad for you is actually probably going to substantially bring your win rate up higher than that.
Yeah.
Uh, so
So there you go. That's why it's good to have math guy on. Because like all these numbers, it's too much for me, man. But
hey,
yeah, I
no.
appreciate your help. So and then uh at the end of it is basically to like the place to where you're looking at the taking back blue player if you think that the side is better, or maybe you're like uh doing the cycle thing if you have like again, if by cycling it you would put yourself in a better place. But uh so it's interesting is that it does something that I wouldn't have expected going into this was just how much it's sort of crazy when you think about it, about how much of this algorithm depends on exactly one card that every player should have on their deck, and like the order in which that turns up is that's such a primary driver where and that's not even a card that scores points.
Yeah, it's
uh
it's not even like it's not even clear how good it is. I think like on its face, right? Like
yeah,
I feel like you can look at an objective and be like, that's like way better for me. You look at advanced intel and it honestly looks fairly harmless on its face. It looks like, oh, I get a pass on turn one. Like that seems good, but you know,
yeah.
it doesn't seem game-breakingly strong on its face. I am going to be really interested to see how this computation kind of changes when we get our second advanced intel. And what I mean by that is our the
An-
second advantage
Another
that
advantage that's
is that
truly
is
worth digging
really
for.
truly worth it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
because we're eventually going to get it. They
Yeah.
already have like said we're getting new objectives and whatever, blah 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 blah
They
blah.
said we're getting faction specific advantages also is something that's worth mentioning.
Right. So, like, what happens when your opponent's advantage deck is 2/3 things that like skews it that much? Is the question of like advanced intel, like, how do you even tone down advanced intel? Like, can you do that without just outright banning it? I
I've thought about that, and the only ways that I can think of are ways that add a ton of text, or at
Sure,
least like a
sure,
fair amount of text. And I think it would have to be from the perspective of like the way that I generally thought about it would be that it would have two alternate effects. One of them being if you have fewer activations or tied with your opponent, and the other one being if you have more activations than your opponent,
sure,
to where
sure.
that
It
latter
has
would be a
different.
duller effect, right?
Yeah,
Is that so that way if you're a 14 act sys list against a 11 act Scar list, that if the sys list hits advanced intel, that they would get a less substantial effect. They'd obviously have to get something, because then if they didn't, then it would be sort of a funny use of the term advantage. But it would be something like that you get observation tokens on your opponent's units once per game, or something like that. But that's the main way that I thought about making it better.
yeah. I honestly think that I would like to see it so that we just have 6 advantages that are all roughly the same power level as advanced intel.
Hmm.
And that way,
You think that's better than having 6 advantages that are at the same power level of like something like ordnance, right? So where, ordnance can break a game,
it
but
can.
it also can be relatively meaningless.
I think the
Uh,
other five advantages just they're not interesting and they don't like 90% of the time they're not even in the game.
I I I like I like ordnance and strafing run. I think that cunning is boring but good, pretty good at least. And then fortified and goodness. Like what's the bad
Garrison,
one? Garrison,
Garrison's just
Garrison.
like,
Those are the ones that are
oh.
like in the case of fortified, it's sort of like okay, who cares? And then for Garrison, it's like please God no, keep it away from
It's
me.
funny because I think the like one of the only circumstances where Garrison is actually good is with riot
Riot
control.
control squads. I was literally thinking the same thing, and I was like, wait a minute. There's
And to be clear, I don't think it's good, but I do think it's at its best
the
with riot control.
apart from fleet troopers, there's one corps out there, one brave little corps that would absolutely love to have prepared positions, and their name is the Riot Control Squad.
Yeah. But no,
Yeah,
I definitely would like to see more advantages that are good every game. I think it I definitely think they took a stab at some things with this with the advantages we have now. Some of it worked, some of it didn't.
yeah,
I imagine they learned from that, and I'd like to see what the second cook looks like.
yeah.
Um,
And I'm betting that we're gonna see more objective slash advantage stuff at Adepticon. Uh, if I had to put money on it, I feel like they'll at least show us something in it.
yeah, probably.
I'm guessing that they're going to be doing a sort of Shatterpoint style of this. Is that with Shatterpoint to a much greater extent than an MCP, but with Shatterpoint is that the objectives come out in their own packs that are pretty cheap because it's just like cards.
Like $15.
Yeah, yeah, and I I would not be surprised if Legion goes down the same route.
I hope they're more different than the Shatterpoint missions. Because the Shatterpoint
Well, the
missions do
I
not feel very different.
the first two I agree they didn't feel very different, but the I think that Never Tell Me the Odds like did start to get pretty wacky, and then I haven't actually looked at the new one yet. I'm
I
not sure
haven't
if you
either. I'm
have.
gonna be honest, I stopped playing that game after the second mission pack, and
Yeah, so
I
yeah,
was like, eh.
for what it's worth, with that third one, it started getting kind of like a little bit nutty,
Sure.
and I haven't looked at this new one yet, but I feel like the amount of text continues to grow with each mission pack that comes out, which
Good,
means
good,
that
because
it's more
those,
different that way.
yeah, every game was just kind of the same.
Yeah, in in
You know?
in the original form when it was just shifting priorities, is that there was like something that Matt Bronson, our own writer, was like one of the first people to point out is how much you could actually kind of algorithmatize the way to play that game.
Yeah, for sure.
But now that there's more variance, I think that it's a more interesting question. Cool. Well, thank you again for working with me in that exercise, Mike.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that by the time this is live, is that I'll have cleaned up all the scribbles and gobbledygook that you may have seen at the tail end of that if you were watching the video. If you were listening to this, then I probably should have said earlier, but given the fact that this was a work session, is that I wouldn't like rush over. Well, actually, sorry. Please rush over to YouTube and also give us clicks on there. I need to remember that I'm a content creator here. But otherwise, if you actually want to see the finished product, you should actually check out fittrue.com/blog, which is where I'm going to be posting this. And I will also be posting a link to that on the video, hopefully. So with that, we're actually going to take a quick break. Is that we're going to be shifting over to my little Q&A session with Hank from Adepticon. And after that, we'll be back to talk about some fun minis release related news and close things out. So we will see you after that little break. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are here for a little bit of a special segment. This is our first time doing this in this new season of the podcast, Notorious Scoundrels. But we have a special guest here with us. This is Hank Edley. You will be able to find his name on the staff credits list at Adepticon as one of the board of overlords. It seems like it's a select group of folks. What did you have to do to get onto the board of overlords, Hank? Is it something that you can say publicly, or was it deeds that are far too dark to talk about on here on the internet?
Well, early on in Adepticon, Jeff Chua and Matt Weeks sort of founded it first year, and
Hmm.
I was dumb enough to raise my hand and volunteer to help really do the outreach and growth of the show. And after that first year that I helped with that, they realized, hey, maybe he might be useful, and brought me into the, brought me into the fold. So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
and
much different
what
show back.
what year was that again?
2003?
Wow.
Mm.
It's crazy just like how long this con's been going on. It's like it's was there anything this is just like a separate question out of curiosity, but like until Adepticon came along, obviously some minis games have been around for a little bit, like especially Warhammer and 40K, but was there any kind of convention even close to that was like such a mecca for minis gaming? I know there's Gen Con, but that's such a generalized thing. I'm just sort of curious about whether you guys were sort of like a first in terms of that stuff.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd say we were the first. You know, Games Workshop was running, games days,
Hmm.
and sort of events. A lot of, like, miniature gaming conventions, that predated Adepticon, like Astoricon or Gen Con,
Yeah.
more gen more generalist sort of stuff, right?
Right.
Where
Right.
and honestly, because they started pre-internet, the whole real focus of those shows was vending, right? Because that was the time of year you could go and actually put, your hands on stuff or see stuff, in person to make buying decisions.
They were trying to
And
sell to toy stores and various other folks. It was a vendor show.
yeah, I mean, it definitely was a vendor buying type
Yeah.
of thing. Oricon was known for, their vendor hall for years. So, Adepticon was kind of the first time I think we really put the play
Hmm.
experience, the event play experience up front.
Yeah.
Um, Vendor hall actually was kind of an afterthought many years later, and we started with, I think we had 110 attendees our first year. Now we're on target for almost 10,000. So
It's
pretty crazy.
grown just a little bit. That's cool. It's great that they have such a storied history of 22 years. That's pretty great. So, as most folks will know, is that this is a year of change for Adepticon. Is It's moved from humble Schaumburg, Illinois, with the long walks from wherever you managed to park or wherever you managed to stay in a
Sure.
hotel and the various other funness that was there. We still obviously had a great time, but I think that you've spoken before about how the convention had just sort of outgrown its shell, and so like a hermit crab, it needed to move to a bigger one. So yeah, it's in Milwaukee. It's a bigger venue. It's a little bit more of an urban area than it had been before. But I was curious about whether there's any other aspects of the show that are new this year that you wanted to highlight for people who might be on the fence about going.
I mean, well, this is, it's another venue transition for us, right?
Hmm.
Although I do believe the Baird Center, it's 1.3 million square feet. It's completely
Wow.
remodeled. Anybody
Yeah.
that's remembers it from the old Gen Con days, it's been completely renovated and expanded from that time even. um, it's going to be our home for many, many years to come.
Okay.
Super excited about it. And there's always something special about being able to sit, 5, 10 years later and say, I was there the first year Adepticon was in the Baird Center. I remember when Adepticon, you know, moved to Milwaukee. I was there that first year. I think, like I'll tell my base experience. I was probably of the core group of people that were looking at new venues for Adepticon. I was definitely kind of the last holdout for trying to stay in Chicago, and
Yeah.
the team had already been up and looked at the Baird Center, and I went up there, scheduled a quick turn and burn to go up and take a look at it, and I was there 5 minutes, and I knew, I mean, this place is our new home. It's
Love at
that
first
impressive.
sight, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you just knew it fit, and I
Yeah.
think for any attendees that have, you know, some some fear of this move, or some, you know, you know, some reserve about this change, I think, give it a chance, because it's impressive. And I've been to a lot of different venues, been to a lot of different conventions, both, for my own hobby, but also for my profession. And
Yeah.
this venue is definitely top tier.
Cool. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm excited just honestly to have more space and yeah, to have a place that where you didn't have to like get really creative and exercise all of your skills in feng shui to actually fit everything in there.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it'll be cool that the Armada players won't have to trek over to a different hotel this time. I know that was out of your control. It was just like there were like I said, it was the point to where there was too much going on for the space that you still had. But I'm excited
yeah,
everybody will be able to share the same space now.
yeah. Definitely getting everybody back under one roof was one of the primary considerations for us.
Yeah,
Addressing our parking issues was another one.
yeah,
Unfortunately, you can't have more parking, um, but it still be free parking, and
right.
so we have more parking, but you now are going to have to pay to park. But the team's done a great job of, Matt, uh, in particular, is very focused on, making sure that Adepticon's affordable to all economic, levels. And so, if you're willing to, there's a lot that it costs $3.50 a day to park.
Yeah,
It's a haul, but you know, if you're willing to do it, you can come to Adepticon for very little. Uh, the convenience factor obviously is going to cost you a little more, but and, that's the nature of, we have free entry for people. Even like you don't need to have a badge. So you only need a badge if you want to participate in ticketed events. And I guarantee
that's
you,
great. I didn't even know that. So people, if people just want to like check out the vendor hall or look at the painted minis on display, is that they can just walk in there, huh?
yeah, they can walk in, walk around, look, go shop in the vendor hall,
Okay.
eat a hot dog. Um,
Yeah.
they can go take a look. They can go look at the Golden Demon, or the
Yeah.
Worthy. Um, to be honest, there's probably an entire weekend of entertainment that you can do at Adepticon that doesn't involve actually having a badge or a ticket, which is pretty crazy. But you know, Matt comes from that, punk era, sneak in the back door movie theater sort of
Sure.
vibe. So he carried that over. But I
That's
mean,
awesome.
yeah, it's one of those things that pretty important to Matt and I, that if you're willing, that all different economic levels can attend and enjoy Adepticon. My first convention experience, I was 16. I drove my car up to Rockford to attend RockCon. At that point in time, it was in a high school, and I slept in my car in the back of some Golden Corral or something that night, and
Yeah.
I didn't have a whole lot of money to rub together, but I managed the gas to get up there, and that was my first convention experience. So, we try to make Adepticon still accessible for folks. Now that said, you can spend a lot of money coming to Adepticon too. Don't get me wrong; it can be expensive,
Yeah.
but you know, kind of
But
depends on what you're willing to do, right? So,
yeah, but I think that's great to hear because so often you do see people that they may be like friends with people that are playing there, or maybe like a spouse of somebody who's playing there, and that the kids came along, and when you walk around, even in the old venue, is that you see a lot of uh especially you see a lot of kids that are like walking by the miniature painting contests, and
yeah,
like you can hear how excited they get when they're looking at something that's really cool. And so like, yeah, that's great, the fact that if the mom or the dad is playing in a tournament, and then the other one's sort of taking care of the kids where they're walking around, is that they don't have to get badges for everybody, is that
yeah.
they can just let them enjoy it. That's really great to hear. So when it comes to like the various companies that support you from a corporate point of view at Adepticon, is that I think it's safe to say that in the grand scheme of things, Atomic Mass Games, which of course, like the listeners of this podcast, is that they make the game that we play, Star Wars Legion. They also make Marvel Crisis Protocol and Star Wars Shatterpoint. Is that they're still relatively new in the grand scheme of things compared to a lot of the other miniature game companies that are out there. But something that I noticed personally is just that it feels like they they intentionally make a particularly large splash at Adepticon when it comes to, like their name was on the lanyards for the last couple of years. They have a lot of items in the swag bag. They uh, I I have seen multiple people who work at AMG who are personally coming to Adepticon to be a part of the fun. And I was just curious if you could comment on the relationship that Adepticon has had with Atomic Mass, and just sort of like how they've been trying to make an impression, even though they're relatively still kind of new on the scene in the grand scheme.
Yeah, sure. I mean, our partnership with Atomic Mass Games and with their parent company, Asmodee, it's been great. Um, we've had a relationship. Prior to Atomic Mass Games being formed, we had a relationship with Asmodee and with Fantasy Flight Games,
Right.
and why you think of kind of Atomic Mass Games as a relatively new company. The folks that comprise of Atomic Mass Games,
Of
Will and
course.
Simone and Dallas, those folks have been in the industry for a
They've
long
been in the
time.
biz. Yeah.
Yeah, bettering you. And so they were familiar with what we did, and what we do. And I think, I don't want to speak for them, I guess, but I think, from their standpoint, right, they don't have unlimited resources. And so when they're looking at like, what shows can we attend, where can we have the biggest impact?
Hmm.
And I think Adepticon, checks a lot of those boxes, and we certainly understand that they have options, and we work really hard uh, for all of our vendors and all of the companies that we partner with to make Adepticon kind of their first choice option. And so when you think about like, you know, all that Marvel Crisis Protocol terrain,
Yeah.
all the the 130 Legion tables that we did, all the new Shatterpoint terrain that we built and painted. And we paint it to a fairly high level, and we make those kind of commitments, and it's worked out, um, and it's been a great two-way street, to be honest.
Yeah. And like obviously they're hosting worlds for all of their games this year, and that, as you said, like you've been directly involved with getting the table set up, and you've also You've also, of course, have had at least a part to play in terms of the prizing that's offered, because it's important, like to both Adepticon and Atomic Mass, that that players sort of have something to attract them to the con, a reason to keep playing the games. And I wanted to just also shift to just asking, keeping it general, because obviously it's going to be up to Atomic Mass in terms of when to show like some pictures of the stuff that they've already posted is going to be on the way, and things like that. But I'm curious what you can tell us about, uh, sort of hearing out feedback that folks may have had about the prize wall last year, and how that is being considered by both Atomic Mass and Adepticon when it comes to really making sure that players have the best experience possible when they come this year.
Yeah, I mean, what I can say about it, I mean,
Yeah.
is that the prize wall last year, that was their first year sort of taking that on. Um, they learned some stuff.
Yeah.
Um, we got some great feedback. Um, this year's version of the prize wall is going to be better than last year's. I mean, the ticket economy in particular is better. Um, the ability for folks to get what they want off the prize wall, based on play, will be way better than it was last year. Um, what I can also tell you is, next year it'll be even better yet, because they're learning, and
Yeah.
every year is an iterative process, and we will continue to build and improve and take feedback. And I know, that's Adepticon's commitment, but I know that's Atomic Mass Games' commitment as well. And so, they do listen, and they do, listen to the community, and they want to make sure they're delivering on their promises. And the prize wall is going to be great. Um, and there's just, unfortunately, um, the sort of red tape you have to go through anytime you're dealing with licensed properties and that kind of stuff, that adds some
Yeah. I
delay
can only
and
imagine.
time.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's going to be good. So I'm looking forward
Cool.
to it.
Yeah. All of us, I think both the hosts and the listeners are just itching to see the pictures, and I know we're going to see them. So we can be patient. We can be nice, quiet, little boys and girls, and wait for the pictures. I'm sure that they're going to be coming up before too long. And I think that I'm going to have like one final question, to apply a little bit of social pressure to a certain other co-host on the show. But first, I just wanted to make sure that I ask you if there's anything else at all that you wanted to shout out about Adepticon this year, to try to maybe convince a few people to take the plunge if they're sort of on the fence about it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just one go back, just real quick, to the prize wall. I mean, one of the great things about having that prize wall at Adepticon, and AMG takes it to a couple other shows like Gen Con, and I think they've done
Yeah.
either UK Games Expo or something like that. But the tickets that you earn, you can use for anything on the prize wall. So it's not like you're just limited to the game you're playing. You can if you wanted to, you can get some Marvel. If you're playing Legion, but you in particular want that acrylic ruler set for Marvel Crisis Protocol, you can save up your tickets and grab that. So the ability
Yeah.
to spend those tickets across different game systems, I think is one of the real advantages of it. As far as, like, the way, I mean, I can tell you, right, we're well ahead of uh, our pre-registration from last year, across the board at Adepticon. Um, our we are ahead of total number of unique participants participating in Atomic Mass Games events across the. So if you think about X-Wing, Armada, Legion, Crisis Protocol, Shatterpoint. The number of unique players that played last year were already ahead of that number, with still
Okay.
2 weeks registration to go and on-site reg.
Yeah.
So it's going to be the biggest Adepticon we've ever done. And the one thing I will tell you, Evan, and you'll see it when you go to the venue, we could double the size of Adepticon and put it in this space, and it's going to look like nobody's there. That's how big this place is. So,
That's insane to think about.
yeah, no, it's crazy. And if you've been to Adepticon the last couple of years, it's been, you've been stacked on top of one another, and the aisles have been tightened, and it's kind of hard to get through the vendor hall
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. Well, we're taking a very liberal approach to aisle spacing and making sure people have room. And there's going to be so much to check out. I mean, you got a whole city of food. I mean, Milwaukee, has great food, great beer,
Yep.
good cocktails. There's one of the things attendees haven't really had the opportunity is at night to walk out the front door and walk a block or two and be in a nice restaurant, or a pub, or and have access to those things. So
Yeah. Schaumburg wasn't exactly in that sort of a situation.
no, not at all. But I mean, it's a whole new venture,
Yeah.
and what I could tell people is, if you're on the fence, come join me, because it's gonna be great to get a first year under our belt, and we're gonna, the history of Adepticon has always been, whether it was when we moved to Schaumburg, moved to the Westin Lombard, or moved to the Crown Plaza. The first year, we're trying on the new clothes, we're trying to figure it
Yeah.
out, and then really in year 2 and 3 is when we really start to roll. So this first year, we're gonna be kind of feeling our way through things, but we could really use everybody, helping us kick the tires.
I'd say that was a really good pitch, Hank. I appreciate it, and I hope that if there's a certain Mike Dashes Barry who is listening to all that, is that maybe this will maybe just be just enough to make his heart grow 3 sizes, and then he'll agree to join all the rest of us at the Fifth Troop at Adepticon. So here's to you, Mike. That's just a little personal guilt trip that Hank and I wanted to add in there.
And you can just tell Mike that I have a long memory.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that on that cryptic note, I do want to thank you for coming by to talk to me a little bit on the cast, Tank. And I am sure that we're going to have you back next year so that we can talk about how Adepticon 2026 is even bigger and better than the one that is about to happen. So
Looking
really
forward
appreciate
to
you
it.
joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And
All
always
right.
good to be on the Notorious Scoundrels. So good luck
Absolutely.
with the new lineup.
Appreciate it. All right. We're back. Thank you again to Hank for giving us some time with the Q&A. He is an extremely busy guy. Like we talked for a bit after that Q&A, and he has, like, even though he's doing a full-timer amount of work, is that he has a regular old job aside from all this Adepticon organization stuff, and it's cool that he really has sort of a I don't know, obviously this is like an America centric point of view, but I feel like around these parts we have sort of this concept of the, like, truly sort of pulling yourself up from being a ragtag group of people into then running like the biggest minis convention out there, and he truly represents that. So pretty cool dude, and again, we really appreciate your time. This is actually a good point to mention, because I didn't earlier, is that we have a couple giveaways that are, you can go to either the fifthtrooper.com, like if you're hearing this, then it actually means that there's only a couple more days to enter. Um, because just from a time frame perspective, is that we have to get the prizes out sooner rather than later. But we have a giveaway that's open to everybody. All we're asking is your answers on a couple of survey questions, and the prize, it's a pretty big one, is that it is a advanced badge to Adepticon for free that you'll pick up at the con. It's just for the con, so it wouldn't cover travel or hotel expenses or anything like that. But the reason why it has that word advanced on there is that this is the one that has the legendary swag bag attached to it, which Mike on our very first episode of the new season regaled us about all of the fun things, many of which are contributed by FFG or AMG, I should say, that show up in there. And so like you can just get that for free if you've been on the fence about coming to Adepticon. And then for our patrons, because I didn't want them to feel left out, because I opened that contest up to everybody, we actually just have a even shorter survey, one question, and if they answer that, you will be entered in for a chance to get a saber tank, which is not really a thing that you can buy on store shelves anymore.
Can't find them.
Nope. Yeah, like that one's been minis in memoriam since like 2 years ago or something.
Yeah.
Like that's been out of here for a while, as sad as it is.
Just too bad, because this is much better in the new edition than it used to be.
It is, and you know, like with 1,000 points is that double saber, which, you know, not to, you know, cast shade on anybody, but double saber was kind of a meme back in the day. If
Well, you can
people wanted
cast shade.
Okay, Mike will always be open to casting shade at people.
Talking to
yeah.
you, Stabcast, Tim Hannon.
Yeah, did you hear that, Tim? Shade has been cast. Yeah, but now like there's a double saber list that that performed. I think it was it at Nova that there was one that performed very well. I think it was a Cody double saber, if I remember right.
I think so.
And we've seen it elsewhere too in various like smaller and larger locals, and it's a very cool model. I feel lucky that I got one like back before the pandemic even started, and then I had plenty of time to build and paint it. But I was able to get a hold of one, and I thought that what better than to have a little bit of a free giveaway for our patrons, because we really do appreciate y'all, and this is a hopefully relatively unique way to say thank you. So check out either Patreon or Fifth Trooper to look at those. Speaking of things that are available in stores and maybe sometimes not, is that we of course have a ongoing segment called Minis in Memoriam, and I was actually ready for this week to be a really sad one, Mike, because if I'm counting right, there were 9 releases that would have been added to that list at once. But the gentleman who manages the Google Sheets that keeps track of this stuff, Rowdy Octopus, and I will make sure that we put a link to his Google Sheets on this YouTube video, just because we keep talking about it. Is that he is so observant, or whatever software he has set up to monitor this is so observant, that he noticed that all of these units were taken off and then they were actually added back on to the site. I think the theory that he has, at least, is that there had been a dusty corner of a warehouse in Asmodee that they just like found some more boxes of stuff. So they were like, hey, we're not actually out of these anymore. It could have been that it was some kind of mistake, but either way, because of that, we actually don't have any new minis in memoriam from last week, which is a good thing. But I thought that we could switch things up, and we have like a little bit of a different, more upbeat musical cue this time. It's going to be for a new segment. Maybe it's going to be a one-time segment. We're going to call it Minis Hanging in There. So Mike will boot up the music here. So yeah, Mike, what do you think about General Veers? You got any interested in that? What do you think? Is that something that you might want to buy and and take home for your friends and family? What do you think
No,
about the general?
actually.
No? Oh, okay. Well, hang on. I got other stuff here. Is that we got Dark Troopers. It was only a couple of years ago that they were sort of dominating the scene. I heard that you can use Guardian on them again. What do you think? You want some Dark Troopers, Mike?
I already have two.
Oh, but do you have a third one though? Because with Moff Gideon, you can run 3 of them.
Then you can't take Guardian.
That's fair. Well, I've been striking out so far, but hey, what about some Rebel specialists? You want Rebel medics? Those are pretty good, right? Rebel repair droids.
Yeah,
the Rebel captain, he was good once.
Only because you get stable situational awareness to that unit, which is no longer good.
Okay, fair. How about Boba Fett? This is another one that was taken off, but then was added back on. Do you want to play some Boba Fett?
Are we talking new Boba Fett or old Boba Fett?
Original Boba Fett. Imperial Boba Fett.
Original Boba Fett apparently doesn't cut the mustard based on the where we're at these days.
Oh boy.
I know.
Okay. Shoot. Well, what about...
We're at a place where Din Djarin is in more competitive winning lists than Boba Fett, if that tells you anything.
Yeah, life is crazy. Sometimes it just throws curveballs at you. Well, okay, I'm gonna keep trying to be a good salesman here. We have Tauntauns. They can go pretty far.
Come on, my man. Give me something to work with here.
Tauntauns, they have a gear slot, right? So you can put recon intel on them to get out on the board earlier.
Yeah, if you want your 100-point unit to be 110-point units.
That was actually a cruel joke. The Tauntauns, for the record, do not have a gear slot. They have...
Oh, there you go. They have comm slots. Right, it's comms and training, right?
Comms and training. There's no room for gear on a Tauntaun, apparently. Okay, well, still striking out. The Pike Soldiers, that was actually one that we thought they were out of, but then they said that they have some more. Maybe some Pike Soldiers kind of interesting.
If the Black Sun boxes are sold out, and when I say Black Sun, I mean the Shadow Collective Battle Force.
Yeah, thing. Shadow Collective is sold out, and Black Suns are sold out.
If that's the only way to get Pikes. Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
Still not a faction, but
Yeah, hey, I will take it. I'll take that as a tepid sale of maybe one box. So we're 1 for 6 so far. Okay, after that we got Bark Speeders. If you wanted to,
I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, okay,
somebody
go ahead, Mike.
verbally assaulted us on the Discord about Bark Speeders this week.
I knew this was gonna come up.
It's not really verbal assault. It was fine, but no, Bark Speeders ATRTs are just better. It's not close. I
agree.
Bark
also
Speeders,
Fluttercraft are better too.
Fluttercraft are better. You're right. I just Barks are 90 points. The only thing that you're getting from them over a clone core unit is the movement, as far as offensive efficiency goes. And if you're putting a sidecar on them, they're not even that much. I mean, they're faster, obviously, but
yeah,
they're not. I don't know. They are easier to kill than a clone core.
Their fragility is the problem, and even though you can technically say that a Fluttercraft is more fragile when you're just sitting there with either one of them, is that guess what? The advantage of a Fluttercraft is that it doesn't have to sit there and take shots from your opponent, is that it can shoot and then run away.
Yeah.
Whereas an ATRT is just more likely to stand up to naked core shooting at it. So I'm with you. That's why I come down on the math of not being a super Bark happy guy. But
Barks are they're expensive too.
Yeah, I think if they were cheaper, it would be more of a thing. But I'm not out of sales pitches to make, Mike. Let's boot the music up just one more time, because I have 2 more where I really think I'm going to be able to convince you. The first one, we actually talked about this last week, but what if you could get characters and terrain in the same pack? That's right. The Crashed Escape Pod is back on sale at the Asmodee store. They did it, folks. Is that they they found more crashed escape pods in the darkest corner of the Asmodee
They
warehouse,
went all the way to Tatooine.
all the way to Tatooine to find those last couple escape pods, so that you can. I mean, C-3PO, he is good in Ewok lists at least, right? If you don't have the model, that's something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hey,
No,
that
R2's
that
just
that's
so
all I'm gonna get
bad.
because I ain't gonna
I'm
make
not
an R2.
advocating for anybody to buy
That's right. I agree with you there. Okay. Well, Mike, this is my last chance to make a sale to you. But we had this box that was briefly off of the Asmodee store, but thank goodness they found some more. We got vital assets.
What I think you mean is the box that has a couple carts and some mines and some bombs in it, but no relevant carts.
Uh, but Mike, you could put that bomb cart, make it a POI.
The base is
Uh,
not even the right size.
well, I mean, you could glue it on top of a POI. Is really what I mean. Uh, that's all I got actually. You can glue the bomb cart on a POI. You do get more barricades, right? If you wanted some more barricades, you get them in vital assets.
Is there actually more barricades in that
I think there
box?
are
I
because
don't.
because but fortified positions was one of those cards, right?
Yeah, but I
That came
think
out in
that
vital assets.
I
I
don't.
thought you got more barricades. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, but does it say on the Asmodee store? Now I'm interested.
Thrilling
I
content. We're looking at
thrilling
whether
content.
barricades
I
came out
don't
in
I
vital
actually I'm
assets.
gonna be honest, I've obviously only bought this once and it was a long
Yeah.
time ago. But I am looking it up.
I had to buy it twice because I actually lost the tiny cards. So that was
There
bad.
are no bad barricades in this
Oh
box.
boy. Wow. Uh,
You
all
do get the
right.
cool
Well,
hostage minis. The new
yeah.
gun ray
If you,
and what's
it's the senator lady, right?
yeah, I just can't remember her name.
The
She's from
one,
that
the
ice
one with like
planet.
the feather boa. Am I thinking of
Feather
the right one?
boa.
But
That
she has like really white skin. I think if I'm remembering the right person, I may be
I
just
think
like totally
she's
off.
like I'm pretty sure she's blue.
Oh well, never mind. I absolutely don't remember
In
what
fact,
she
no,
is.
I'm
Then.
actually I'm positive she's blue. She's blue on the art for the card.
Okay, there you
Um,
go. Well, for those thrilling couple of characters of a Nimoidian who might be Newt Gunray, and then the blue senator lady, is that for the low cost of what is it, like $35?
it is 39.99.
Oh, jeez. The low cost of 39.99 is that you can buy an expansion that gives you a little bit of mildly okay plastic that has, and then some cards that have value for a obsolete part of the game.
Does have my favorite turn zero card in it of all time. So at least for some
Which
nostalgia.
which one is that?
Which one do you think it is?
Hmm. Hostage exchange?
No.
Oh, okay. Which one is it?
Supply drop.
Ah, yeah, supply drop. I like supply drop a lot. That made games interesting.
It was just it was
Yeah, it was just
fun.
fun.
It was just fun.
I'm totally with you. It was supply drop was just fun, and there was no situation to where like it wouldn't matter for your opponents.
Yeah.
There would be like it led to some like a couple times to where you would draw like the treat one when you're a totally droid list, and you'd be like, or you draw
Oh
the repair
man.
one when you're a total people list, and you go like, oh man. And then of course, I will harken back to the good old days when scale was good. If
Yes.
the kids remember that, is that when you drew like I remember I drew the scale one with an Obi-Wan list one time, and he like scaled a building, got extra movement out of it, and then he jumped. and he got like ridiculously far in his charge, and it was awesome.
Yeah, he
Uh,
moved, climbed
yeah,
basically,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then like
exactly.
used his climb to like spring vault off the
Yeah,
top of the
it
building.
felt very Jedi-ish. And also one time I did it with Dooku, which was extra hilarious because it's like the one time that Dooku sort of like figured out how to deal with the terrain that's at a height larger than himself. But yeah, those good old days are sadly gone. Is that and so as I've been saying for a while, ever since I wrote that first buyer's guide, is that um, I do want to say that I don't think that Atomic Mass has any influence over what Asmodee puts on their site. Like Asmo is going to put the stuff that they have on for sale, so I don't think that this is like I don't think this is like intentionally like bad customer practice on AMG's side. I will say that on the Asmodee's side, I think it's pretty rough. It's probably just that nobody's like cared enough to notice is the real story. But I would feel really bad about if a new player like looks at that pack. It's literally called Vital Assets. But
Yeah.
this is something that I read about in the first buyer's guide that I wrote is that it's the most ironic expansion that's out there now because you don't actually need anything in that box.
It used to be vital. I hope
It
they
used to
redo
be.
supply drop. I don't even know how that would look though, because the advantages are very unlike conditions, they're not symmetrical.
They they
Or they're
could
not
have
intended to be symmetrical, you know?
they could have well, because you know they've already done it with 45 positions, right? It's like you could have a supply drop that where the effects would probably have to be weaker, but it would at least add a little bit of the RNG fun to see like what you actually drew.
Yeah, yeah.
I could see that working.
Yeah, I think it would be cool, but
And like let's say that you would have to actually put them within a half range of a POI so that that way your opponent, depending on the situation, would actually have an opportunity to get it. Um, yeah, at
yeah,
that point you wonder about is it an advantage anymore or not, you know? So
right, that's the
I don't
thing.
know. Yeah.
The I think I actually would really like to see the turn zero thing evolve a bit. I think it would be
Hmm.
really interesting if you just got all three advantages that you brought
Hmm.
and you couldn't ban or swap them. It was just like every game
Then
you
they'd really need to get rid of advanced intel.
would they if everybody could take it?
Well, they I think they would because then it would be like an obvious boring choice and because like you
I think you could make
you
the
don't
same
want
argument for the current game state though.
sure, but at least in the current game state, it does set up, even though it's a mini game that I think a lot of us aren't happy that it exists, but it is sort of like a mini game that exists in the current game state. Whereas if everybody just always had it, then it becomes like a net nothing.
I think that's a much better scenario than what we have now though.
Oh, interesting. Uh,
I think that at least makes it so that it's even, you know,
hmm.
as
Wow.
opposed to one person getting access to it because a coin flip determined that they should or should not get access to it.
Mike the egalitarian. Look at you
Yeah,
treading
I
softly.
right. I don't know. That's kind of I also if Garrison would be much better if you could plan for it every game.
Yeah.
Like if you could know that you were always going to have one core unit prepared positions, uh, you could actually like because foundationally right now you can't really build your list to like work around it because one third of the time you're not going to have it, or two-thirds of the time you're not going to have access to it. So
Yeah.
is it worth tooling out a unit that's going to actually use it? No. But if you
Fair
had it every
enough.
game, I
All
don't know.
right. Well, so not many sales made there, so that's too bad. But I appreciate you being willing to visit the store. Uh,
To be
so
clear, you opened with Veers, and I said no, don't buy it. The only reason is because Veers is coming out again in a much better pack.
that's fair. That's fair. Okay, well, Mike, it's been a heck of an episode. I think that it's about time to land this plane. So how do we do that again?
That is a great question. This has been the Notorious Scoundrels, Season 4, Episode 4. I'm Mike.
I'm Evan.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.